Oliver, you were previously quite bearish about the pound. Why was that?
Yeah, so the problem we thought that the Prime Minister had was that she was not just conducting one set of negotiations, she was conducting two. One was with the EU, which is obviously difficult enough, but the other was with her own party. And there was a group of Conservative MPs that perceived the risks of hard Brexit were relatively low, that didn't really see the need for a transitional arrangement. And therefore, with a majority of only 17, these MPs had quite a lot of leverage. That's why last year we argued that what needed to happen was a new general election. If the polls prove correct, that should result in a much larger Conservative majority, and that will give the Prime Minister the ability, the strong domestic political position to make the compromises necessary with the EU to achieve a reasonable outcome and the right outcome.
But is it a given, though, that even if Theresa May wins a bigger majority, as you say, I mean, there may not be more hardcore Brexiteers elected as Tory MPs?
Well, that's a very good point, but we don't see this as a mandate for hard Brexit election. If you actually look at the rhetoric that's been coming out of the UK government recently on some of the key issues, so that includes things like the Brexit bill, that includes things like the oversight of the European Court of Justice after the UK has left, that has softened quite significantly. So I think there is a big gap between the public rhetoric in the election, which remains quite hard, and in private what the government are up to, which I think has softened quite considerably. And I think that's why we've become a lot more optimistic about Brexit and don't see a hard Brexit outcome as our base case scenario.
Because you think a soft Brexit is positive for the pound?
We do think soft Brexit is positive for the pound, yes. We think that the economic disruption that would be caused by hard Brexit, which we define as basically no transitional deal. The key problem with Brexit is time. The negotiations that the European Community had with Greenland in the 1970s took 3 years, so you can't negotiate everything in 2 years. You need a transitional deal. Without that transitional deal, you're facing really considerable economic disruption, and I think sterling would be a lot lower.
Now, the note that you put out on Tuesday, which captured quite a lot of interest in the FX market, obviously we saw that big jump in the pound on Tuesday. How much of that was people who were previously bearish about the pound closing short positions against the sterling, and how much of it was genuine buyers' interest, do you think?
I think it was probably a mixture of both. There was a bit of a debate at the time as to whether a general election would be bearish or bullish for the pound. Some people were saying that it would be a mandate for hard Brexit and therefore it should be bearish for the pound. But we were arguing the opposite, which is basically the UK government needs to be in a stronger domestic political position in order to conduct the negotiations. Anyway, we saw what happened. We saw what happened on Tuesday. Seems like we might have got that one right.
Very briefly, what's the chit-chat in the market about where sterling goes over the next 6 to 9 months?
Well, I think one thing I can tell you is that sterling is probably going to be less dominated by politics and more dominated by fundamentals, which look pretty mixed, because growth since the referendum has obviously surprised to the upside. It's been quite good. But at the same time, the UK, well, the pound's fundamentals some of them look quite weak, which is the current account deficit, one of the largest in the world. So I think basically sterling's going to go from being completely dominated by politics back towards fundamentals.
Very good. All right, Oliver Harvey from Deutsche Bank. Got to leave it there. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you.